They would rather scrap a vehicle, scrap it for its parts, pieces, and components before issuing a tremendous discount on it. Well, I'm talking like 50% off. They would rather scrap it. Scrap it before taking that kind of black eye to their brand, to their image and a reputation. All these vehicles, what happens to them? That goes back to the vehicle manufacturer, goes to the regionalized distribution of them. Another thing that we've seen recently when they can't sell their new vehicle inventory is they begin to turn away their allocations. They begin to turn away their deliveries. I've seen and heard of dealerships wholesaling vehicles at maybe a 30 or 40% loss comparatively to wanting to sell it at a 20 to 30% loss to you and I, the consumer. This is why so many Chevy dealerships look like this. Lines upon lines of unsold Trailblazers and Trax. I find it quite comical seeing the amount of big body Broncos that are just sitting collecting dust on dealership lots, literally collecting dust. So honestly, the way I see it is dealers have two options. They either cut their losses early or they close their doors. They go bankrupt. They go belly up. Somebody call the whoop-de-doo hotline and tell them to stop the press. We got $5,000 off this Cadillac Escalade. They still have so many unsold units, unsold 2024s collecting dust on dealership lots. No, new vehicles aren't selling right now when you look at wholesale values. Wholesale prices have gone up 10 to 15% since January of this year. These are pretty substantial discounts. $46,000 with 53,000 miles. If you look at that and see, wow, maybe that's not that terrible of a price tag. This one also has been in a minor to moderate car accident on its Carfax history report. Having you come back for repeat business and having you take your vehicle through their service bay regularly, that is where a lot of their profits lie. Hey YouTube, Untamed here. We're bumping into a very unique situation within the automotive market at large. Right now, there are so many dealerships that cannot sell their new vehicle inventory. And well, when they can't sell their new inventory, that really triggers a domino effect of a few different things. In today's video, I'm going to explain exactly what happens when a dealership fails to sell their new inventory. Many dealerships look like this right now, just lines upon lines of unsold trucks, SUVs, cars, you name it. And I'm really just in the epicenter of this particular dealership. It extends far beyond around the perimeter here, but it's really because of price tags nowadays. This is a high country Suburban, a Chevy Suburban, 2025 model here. But look at that, that's our new reality. If you have a large family, heaven forbid you have a large family and you need a full-size SUV, get ready to buck up $90,000 for this giant Suburban here. Yikes. And don't even get me started on the mid-size pickup truck segment. What happened to the days where you can come out and pay $25,000 to $30,000 and get a nicely spec'd mid-size truck? Not anymore. All of these are over $50,000. All of them. These trail bosses here, the ZR2s, check this out. The ZR2, get a load of that. Get a load of that. Just under $60,000 for the Chevy Colorado ZR2. Not even the Bison package. The Bison package will tip it over 60 grand. Pretty sickening if you ask me. So if you're not interested in spending $90,000 for a full-size SUV, or over $65,000 for a full-size truck, or over $50,000 for a mid-size truck, maybe, just maybe, a Chevy Trailblazer or a Chevy Trax is for you. Let me remind you of how much they want for these guys. So $30,000, hopefully you can see it and I get a lot of reflection here, but $30,585 for this particular Trailblazer here. That's the RS, to be fair. Let me give you an LT model here, a little bit more of a sparse down example right next to it. But you're still spending over 28 grand, $28,475 for the 2025 Trailblazer LT. Let's go check out a Trax. Right here, this should be a little bit less, theoretically here, and it is. So just under $25,000 for this LT, one LT Chevy Trax. We see so many dealerships stack up their lots with these Trax and Trailblazers because they can actually sell them. They can actually sell a vehicle that costs $30,000 or less. They can get you approved. Most people, they can get approved with a loan, right? But when it comes to a $90,000 Suburban, not the case. A $65,000 Silverado, again, a little bit more tricky, a little bit more difficult. So this is why so many Chevy dealerships look like this. Lines upon lines of unsold Trailblazers and Trax because they want to bring them in because, well, they can actually move this metal eventually. Not only do you need to worry about the astronomical price tags on these, the cost of insurance over doubling in the last 2.5 years, you have to worry about repair bills now. Repair bills on these vehicles has become much more complex and much more complicated. You can't just pop the hood on so many of these vehicles nowadays and work on them with any level of confidence. That's the unfortunate truth, ladies and gentlemen. And well, obviously there's gonna be a manufacturer warranty. Let's get that out of the way. But what happens after that expires? then, well, you're stuck with trying to fix the 32-inch LCD screen on these things that, well, much of these vehicles come with nowadays. They've stuffed them to the gills with technology. They cram them full of creature comforts. They get them to the point where you just can't work on them anymore. And that's what they want. They want you to bring it into the dealership. Chevy Traverse LT, lower trim model, still costing over 45 grand. That, to me, is sickening. Seriously, what happened to the days of being able to work on our cars? You know, that generation has come and gone, unfortunately. And well, you can't say you blame the current generation. You can't just pop the hood. There's too much technology. You got to have a freaking PhD in engineering nowadays, or computer science, if you're going to try to figure these vehicles out. So you have to take it to the dealership and spend an arm and a leg, and that just adds insult to injury, more salt to the wound. Get a load of the price tags on a 6.2 liter V8 Chevy Silverado Z71. Z71, this truck not that long ago would be in the $55,000 range, 50 to 55. But now, well, we're over 71 grand for a Trail Boss. That, to me, is a big part of the problem. Let's face it, your money doesn't go as far anymore. Just back in 2020, $100,000 is equivalent to $124,000 today. And it's not just Chevy. Here we have a Nissan Armada. This one happens to be a Platinum intelligent four-wheel drive, but look at that. We're not far off from that Suburban high country pricing, right? $82,410 for a Nissan. For a freaking Nissan, that's still how much money you gotta spend. Yikes. Perhaps you're trying to save some money. You wanna pick up a Nissan Murano, perhaps. Look at the price tags on these. Even these have gotten completely out of touch with reality. $50,000 dang near for this SL trimmed Nissan Murano. One thing we talk about plenty on the channel is since 2019, we've seen a 42% increase in MSRPs across the board, across all vehicle manufacturers. Subaru, believe it or not, had the smallest MSRP price hikes of any vehicle manufacturer. The average being 42%, they hiked up about 28% across their entire lineup. So, although not good by any means, it's still the best. And when it comes to Subaru and Honda, they are both really good at restricting and guiding their supply chains to match projected demand. They've been really good at that really throughout the last several decades. They match demand very well. They kind of anticipate what demand's going to be, and then they produce such amount of vehicles to match it. So they really struggle the least when it comes to overpopulating their lots, in my opinion. Here we have an indication of those price hikes, right? $38,443 for this Crosstrek here, Wilderness Edition. Nearly 40 grand. And I don't know, I used to buy Subarus a ton back in the day, WRX STIs, went through a phase in college, so I've gotten a really keen idea of what these cost back then. So now knowing that they cost 40 grand for the Crosstrek, that does feel a little steep for this. And you guys tell me, am I crazy to actually like this color? Geyser blue on the Subaru Outback Wilderness Edition, and well, it's about $8,000 more compared to that Crosstrek over there. $46,284 for this particular Outback. You guys tell me, does it look good? They do have great resale value, so that's always a major plus for the Outback in particular. I admit, with crossovers and SUVs taking over the United States, I do still applaud and appreciate Subaru for keeping the WRX nameplate alive. They killed off the STI, we know that, but the WRX still lives on as a sport sedan here. $42,253 for this particular one. Kind of crazy that is now the price tag. You could buy STIs for high 30s not that long ago, but the WRXs ticking over 40 grand. So what happens when dealers can't sell the new inventory? Step number one is they begin to hike prices of the used vehicle inventory. They begin to hike them just enough to overcompensate for the losses of, well, their inability to sell their new vehicles over there. They'll hike this up just a little bit to pad that profit margin to make up for their losses. Well, Exhibit A, we have a Ford Ranger XLT with some method wheels and some worn out tires on it, but who would have thought that increases the value $10,000. $32,000 for this example, 2019 with nearly 35,000 miles and worn out tires. And it still cost you dang near what this particular trim costs for a brand new model. Just because it has a lift kit and some worn out tires? No thanks. Or perhaps you're interested in a used Subaru Crosstrek. You just saw the price tags over there of a high-spec, high-trimmed example. This one here is a lower-trimmed example with 12,700 miles, and they want $30,000 for it. 2024, only a year old, but this exact trim, brand new, was probably maybe 31 grand. Perhaps you want to get one even a year older, a 2023 model with about the same miles, but spend $3,000 more. You can't really see it, but they want $33,000 for it. Just a little bit higher trim. You got some leather interior in this one. That's it. You guys know I have a huge soft spot for the Toyota Tundra here, the V8 Tundra, but even their price tags have gotten wildly out of this world. $46,000 with 53,000 miles. If you look at that and see, wow, maybe that's not that terrible of a price tag. This one also has been in a minor to moderate car accident on its Carfax history report. So you get an accident on it and you're still spending 46 grand. This vehicle brand new was right about that, maybe just $2,000 more brand new in 2021. Here we have a couple 2020 GM products here. We have a GMC Sierra 1500 sporting the 5.3 liter V8. Then we have a Chevy Silverado over here with the baby Duramax, the 3 liter Duramax. But get a load of that, 84,500 miles, and they want $39,000 for it. Well, I can assure you, buying the same exact trim of the Chevy Silverado right now with discounts and GM discounts, you can go spend 45 grand and get the same truck 2025. So why did they do this? People cannot afford the prices on new vehicles more often than not. You know, this right here is a good example, a better example. This is a 2021 Chevy Silverado Z71. They want $44,000 for it, just over 31,000 miles on it. You saw how much a brand new Chevy Silverado Z71 cost. What was it, 71 grand? Over $70,000 for a brand new example of this. That is pretty sickening, right? So people can't afford to go out and make those monthly payments. Monthly payments on a $70,000 pickup truck is between $1,300 and $1,400 per month, really depending on how much you put down, right? Over 60 or 72 months. That becomes suffocating for most Americans. They know that. So they'll start to hike up the price tags on the examples like this just a little bit. I'm talking maybe a few grand, but just enough to overcompensate for their losses that they're not selling over there new. So hike this up just a little bit, and not to mention, you'll have a higher interest rate on a used vehicle purchase. That gives them a little bit better of a kickback from the lending institution that they go through. So on average, it's 11% right now for a used vehicle purchase. 7% interest rate is average for a new vehicle purchase. And that's before any kind of incentives are tacked on, of course. No new vehicles aren't selling right now when you look at wholesale values. Wholesale prices have gone up 10 to 15% since January of this year. So just over the last, 6-7 months here, it's gone up 10 to 15%. That is largely thanks to what you're seeing behind me here. They can actually sell a $40,000 vehicle much easier than the $80,000 brand new example. Now, another thing that we see from vehicle manufacturers, not so much dealers, is they begin to slow or even halt the production of their vehicles when they see a huge drop in sales. And we see that right now. Just between now and last March, just a few months ago, we have seen a huge decrease in the new vehicle inventory available, not because they're selling faster, but because they've actually slowed production drastically. We had 3 million new vehicles available within the US back in March. Right now, we're looking at about 2.5 million. So they've decreased it substantially because they still have so many unsold units, unsold 2024s collecting dust on dealership lots. Another indicator that dealers are struggling to sell their inventory is they begin to offer pretty nicely incentivized leasing options on their inventory. We're seeing it from GMC dealers right now, especially on the GMC 1500 Sierras here. The elevation trim in particular, they're not selling. Even with $10,000 off discounts, they can't move this metal. They're really struggling to sell them. So they're offering these very, very incentivized leasing options for them to actually get these off their lots. I'm always just appalled when I see the price tags of these heavy-duty, full-size trucks here. Always just sickened by it. Here we have an example, $91,000 for the Sierra 3500 Crew Cab AT4. Absolutely insane. After you pay taxes, the fees, and all the other additional bogus that they're going to try to slap you with, you're well into the 6 figures. After hiking up the price tags of their used vehicle inventory, you begin to see a lot more of this. These are pretty substantial discounts, right? When the starting MSRP is just at $57,000, they have a $10,000 off advertised discount or an incentivized interest rate of 0% over 36 months. I know a lot of people who have walked into GMC dealers and easily talked them into going it to $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 off if it meant making a deal today. I actually kind of like the fact that we're seeing the environment be like this right now because it's going to weed out the greedy dealers, in my opinion. The dealers that try to hold firm to their prices and just try to stiff you no matter what, even through the difficult times for everybody, those are the dealerships that are going to find themselves in a sticky position. Those are the dealerships that are going to have to close their doors eventually. The dealers that actually cut their losses and cut their losses early and actually, heaven forbid, earn you as a customer and maybe even a lifetime customer by giving you an excellent deal in your vehicle, those are the dealerships that are going to stay afloat, even if it means taking a little bit of a loss on their inventory that they have right now. Any smart general manager will be the first to tell you that having you come back for repeat business and having you take your vehicle through their service bay regularly, that is where a lot of their profits lie. through their service bay. Bringing it in for repairs, bringing it in for oil changes, blah, 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 you name it. That is where they're going to make their money. So they just need to get you into a vehicle, even if it means taking a little bit of a loss. If you're like me and you're experiencing sticker shock with your auto insurance premium, be sure to thank a Cadillac Escalade IQ driver for that. Look at this. Hopefully you can see it. $162,000 for this Cadillac Escalade IQL Premium Sport. I say thank one of these drivers because if they were to get in an accident, if they were to total this vehicle, well, insurance paying that out for this vehicle, totaling this out, that ultimately affects our insurance premiums. We all pay into the same bucket when it comes to insurance. When they're forking over $160,000 in payouts, that ultimately affects our monthly payment. I'm sorry guys, I spoke too soon. Somebody call the whoop-de-doo hotline and tell them to stop the press. We got $5,000 off this Cadillac Escalade, bringing it down to $157,000 now. All right. Perhaps you are the fancy type. We have a BMW X5 for $44,000 with just over 50,000 miles on it. But it does come with a little bit of a discount, $3,500 off now, bringing it down to just about $43,500. You tell me, is it worth it? Right next to it, I'm always dropping my jaw looking at the price tag of this one. It is technically a used 2024 Ford Expedition Max, $76,000. Only 2,500 miles, obviously gently used, of course. A year old, though, at this point. These brand new weren't far off from that price tag there. I want to share this with you because you don't see it every day. A 1990 GMC Jimmy. Kind of neat. Obviously in excellent condition, given the year, of course. But man, $40,000 is what they want for this old Jimmy. The interior looks awesome. Check this out. Look at that. This is retro. Grandpappy was reeling in the ladies with this old thing. Something you don't hear too much about is flooring cost. With each vehicle sitting on a dealership lot, this dealership is paying something called a flooring cost. It's like a small interest rate that they pay to have these vehicles. They don't just own them outright. They are each on a line of credit through the dealership. So every single month, although not a lot, every single one of these vehicles is costing them money. It begins to add up when you have a few hundred vehicles in your inventory, right? It bleeds out the dealership over time. Now, I'm always fascinated by the Bronco Raptor in particular. When the Bronco Raptor came out, it was being hit with huge markups on them. I'm talking like $10,000 or $15,000, $20,000 over MSRP is what a lot of greedy dealerships were trying to deploy on these. Look at the MSRPs on them. Hopefully I can show it to you. It's not the best lighting, I'm sorry guys, but $94,000 about for this Bronco Raptor, okay? 94 grand. These are commonly coming now with a $20,000 to $29,000 off discount to move this metal. I'm not even kidding, $20,000 to $29,000 off. I follow a number of Facebook group pages for the Bronco Raptor. Dealers have a very difficult time selling these. It's crazy that we went from having huge markups to them not being able to sell them. I think that that's a huge indicator that Ford just wildly overpriced this vehicle out of the gate. It's a thrilling vehicle, it's a fun vehicle, it's exciting, but it's not worth anywhere near 94 grand. I once had a general manager describe their new vehicle inventory as their bait. Their bait or their candy to get you onto the dealership lot to try to get you to trade in their used vehicle. Now, between service on your vehicle, working through the service bay and doing the necessary maintenance and repairs, that's a huge part of the revenue for any dealership. But your trade-in is probably the second largest piece of revenue for the dealership at large. So when you come buy a new vehicle, they're not too focused on maximizing the amount of money that they get on that new vehicle. That's why we see incentivized rates being offered on them and pretty substantial discounts right out of the gate. Your used vehicle, that's where they make a ton of money. For example, I bet this dealership offered maybe low to mid 40s for this particular 2022 or 2023 Toyota 4Runner TRD off-road. Obviously it has a couple little additions on it, modifications, roof rack to it. Low to mid 40s is what they maybe gave this person, okay? I assure you that they are now selling it for high 40s, maybe even at $50,000. Just under 20,000 miles on it. This would not have been a very good deal a year ago when they were still offering the 5th generation 4Runner here, but because the new 6th generation 2025 4Runner is now out and it only sports a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder underneath the hood, people miss old trusty here. They miss a 4-liter naturally aspirated V6 in the 5th gen, and these values are starting to spike up a little bit. And dealers are smart. They track values pretty closely. They're going to make a fortune on this one. I just want to show you this vehicle here because this here is a Chevy SS, and there's a bit of a cult following behind them. It really is a vehicle of, if you know, you know. At first glance, for most people, it'd be like, oh, cool, nice, Chevy Malibu. But This Chevy SS is sporting a huge V8 underneath the hood, drilled and slotted Brembo brakes. This is a very, very fast car and a thrill to drive. And it's kind of unassuming. So that's really kind of a large part of the appeal for so many people. Tell me what you think of this. We've already talked about them hiking up the prices of used vehicles to make up for the lack of new vehicle sales. We've talked about them slashing their prices, offering large discounts, and hopefully taking a loss on the vehicles before going belly up. But what else? What else can dealerships do? Another tactic deployed by so many dealers is if they can't sell a particular vehicle that's been sitting on their lot for so long, one thing that they could do is offer it up as a demo vehicle. A demo vehicle for either a customer or for their sales staff, for them to drive around for a little bit, allow it to technically become a used vehicle, and then they can sell it as such. They can sell it as a used vehicle, hitting you with used vehicle interest rates. That allows them to get a much larger kickback from the lending institution. So that's something to think about. If they can't sell it, they can still bring down the price tag just a little bit as a used vehicle, but they'll get a larger kickback because they'll be selling it at a used vehicle interest rate, getting a bit of a better kickback. So they'll bring down the price tag, which is appealing to you and I, the consumer, but ultimately they're getting about the same had they sold it just new because they're getting a little bit of a larger financial kickback from the lending institution. Maybe I shouldn't laugh, but I find it quite comical seeing the amount of big body Broncos that are just sitting collecting dust on dealership lots, literally collecting dust on dealership lots. Remember when these first came out? Man, they were quick to slap you with a markup. But $52,800 for this particular Sasquatch package, example here, $52,800. They would easily try to get you for $62,000 not that long ago. But now, even with $8,000 to $10,000 off discounts, they can't move this metal. Add on to the whole demo point, we did see a lot of dealerships take that the wrong way during the pandemic, because a lot of dealerships would try to pride themselves on not charging markups on new vehicle inventory. They would pride themselves on it and beat their chest on it, put it on billboards, you name it. But what they would do is just that. They would have one of their sales reps drive it around for maybe a month or two, allow it to become a used vehicle technically, and they'll sell it as a used vehicle with the market adjustment on it. So we saw so many dealerships do that. It's just they're falling victim to greed, right? Selling a brand new, technically a brand new 2023 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro with only 3,000 miles on it, but they were selling it at $62,000 with that markup attached to it. So pretty sickening to see that, but it was quite commonplace. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but our friends up in the north are Canadian dealerships. It's actually illegal for them to charge markups on new vehicle inventory, so a lot of them are doing that tactic, making them used. Another thing that can happen if a dealership cannot sell their new vehicle inventory is they will wait. They'll wait it out. They'll try to wait it out as long as possible, and we see so many of them doing that. They refuse to slash prices with dealer discounts, and they wait for vehicle manufacturer discounts and incentives to come down. GM dealers are notorious for this. They just refuse to put on their additional dealer discounts, and they just wait for General Motors, to attach their incentives to their vehicles. They don't lose money when GM, the vehicle manufacturer, or Ford, when they offer their manufacturer discounts and incentives, they don't lose money. The dealership doesn't lose money. That is coming straight from the manufacturer. So a lot of them will try to wait it out as long as they can, and well, that proves to their detriment. We did see something like that with the Ford F-150 Lightning in particular. Do you guys remember we were seeing $22,000 to $29,000 off discounts to try to move this metal? That was through government subsidies to $7,500 off, dealer discounts added with manufacturer incentives to try to move this metal. So even at $60,000, this still wasn't selling for so long. That's why we saw so many unsold 2023 units teeter deep into 2024. That's why Ford halted production of the F-150 Lightning really through the majority of 2024, just so they could catch up, just so they can sell the inventory that they did have out there at dealership lots. These Lightnings proved to be a huge burden for dealerships. Another thing that can happen is dealers can do dealer-to-dealer trades. Let's say they had a bunch of Toyota Tacomas here in Wyoming. They're not selling, obviously, as you see behind me. Maybe they are selling in, let's say, Texas. Maybe Texas, the Tacoma is a huge seller. They might try to do a dealer-to-dealer trade. It's better when they keep it within their network. That's why we see so many major named networks for dealerships arise, like Ken Garff, like Halliday. There's these common names that really are kind of buying up all the dealerships, enhancing or expanding their networks, right? So they can then do that. They can move their vehicle inventory as such to sell it the best way. So dealer-to-dealer trades is a very clear and very common option. Another thing that we've seen recently when they can't sell their new vehicle inventory is they begin to turn away their allocations. They begin to turn away their deliveries. Like the F-150 Lightning in particular over there, a lot of Ford dealers were actually turning them away because they had too many of them. Way too many of them sitting on their lots. They can't sell the ones they have. Why would they accept more? That's detrimental for a dealership to turn away allocation because it affects their reallocation rates. It affects their future deliveries, not just on the Lightning, but on all vehicles, maybe the entire F-150 lineup, of course, all trims. So they try not to turn them away, but it does get to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore. They have 24 of them on their lot. They can't sell them, they're collecting dust. It's costing them a flooring cost every single month. It's bleeding them out. So let's pretend this dealership slashed prices the best they could and they still couldn't sell this inventory. They just have it stacked up in their lots. They're turning away all their deliveries, all their allocations, and well, they need to go belly up. They need to close their doors, unfortunately, and they need to go bankrupt. It happens, right? I mean, it happens more often than we even realize. What if that does happen? All these vehicles, what happens to them? That goes back to the vehicle manufacturer, goes to the regionalized distribution of them. So they will then take all these Tacomas, all these Tundras behind me, and then move them, like what we referred to earlier as, moving them to districts and regions that they are actually selling the best. Maybe those Texas, like I referred to. They'll throw them all to Texas, to dealerships down there. They'll reallocate these vehicles down to them. They don't just crush them or get rid of them at that point. They try to redistribute them or regionalize them to sell them better. Another tool within a dealership's toolbox is they can actually send their vehicles to wholesale. They can send even their new vehicle inventory to wholesale, send it through auction to try to just get rid of it. They can do that. That too will impact their reallocation rates. That's why you see a lot of like Ford dealerships receive Ford F-150 Raptor Rs. Raptor Rs through wholesale are right around $125,000 right now as we speak, end of July 2025. That's about $10,000 over sticker wholesale value for that vehicle. So it'd be pretty easy for a dealership to receive a Raptor R, then wholesale it and make 10 grand easily, line their pockets. But that will impact the reallocation rates. That notifies Ford that they did that. And well, Ford wants them to sell to you and I, the consumer. That's what they want, right? They want to sell it, not just take the easy cash out, right? So that does affect their ability to get reallocation rates, but they maybe won't care so much on vehicles like this. The Toyota Tacoma that they get hundreds and hundreds of them, maybe they just have too many of them. It's not quite like the Raptor R in that sense. So they can technically wholesale these, but wholesale values on these, much different than a Raptor R, of course. Wholesaling a Tacoma will render a huge loss for the dealership. I want to make that very clear here. That's why they don't do it. This is a last resort option. One pretty disgusting thing that I've heard before is I've seen and heard of dealerships wholesaling vehicles at maybe a 30 or 40% loss comparatively to wanting to sell it at a 20 to 30% loss to you and I, the consumer, all for the sake of not setting a precedent. They want to set a precedent at selling their vehicles at a huge loss because word might get out. Word might get out that they're practically giving away vehicles and they would rather do it on the low, through the wholesale, through the auction, if it means keeping it hush. Well, I hate to break it to you, but vehicle manufacturers are like that as well. They would rather scrap a vehicle, scrap it for its parts, pieces, and components before issuing a tremendous discount on it. Well, I'm talking like 50% off. They would rather scrap it. Scrap it before taking that kind of black eye to their brand, to their image, and a reputation. They'd rather scrap it and avoid having a history or any reputation of selling it half off because they couldn't move that metal. And a big part of the rub for so many people is we've seen price tags of vehicles increase up to the moon, 42% higher since 2019, but I assure you, many of our wages and salaries have not increased by the same amount since then. Pretty sad. I hate to say it like this, but it all kind of feels like it's by design, right? They're pricing out the middle class. It really is an upper class thing to go buy a new vehicle nowadays, especially a new truck. You're gonna be spending well over 64 grand for it. That is just becoming out of touch with reality. Most Americans, they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're struggling to make ends meet. They're struggling to pay their mortgage, their rent, the cost of groceries, the cost of insurance. Now we want to hit people with these price tags on new vehicles? No, thank you. So right now we just see a lot of Americans sitting back, holding on to their current vehicles, performing that necessary maintenance and service on their current vehicle instead of coming out and trading in for a new vehicle every 3 to 5 years. And that is why new vehicle inventory is just sitting collecting dust. That is why vehicle manufacturers are slowing and halting their production of so many vehicles right now, because people can't afford and cannot justify these monthly payments. I mean, people don't want to come out and spend $51,000 for a Toyota Tacoma. That's how much this one costs. People are just fed up and, well, they're voting with their pocketbooks. Guys, I know this video might have disappointed some of you. If a vehicle dealership in your area is just sitting on a lot of inventory, no, that doesn't mean they're going to give it away. Theoretically, they have an opportunity to offer huge discounts and cut their losses, but let's face it, unfortunately, most dealerships are far too greedy to let that happen, and they too are afraid of setting that precedence, right? So, unfortunately, they would rather close the doors, go belly up, and give them back to the vehicle manufacturer before cutting you and I a tremendous deal. So guys, I'll wrap up the video there. As always, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to tune into these videos. If you like this type of content, please let me know in the comment section. Please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means a ton, and I promise you it doesn't go unnoticed. Until next time.